Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Bilkent University Library Art Gallery. Before we start, I'd just like to remind you all that we have a new exhibition on, opened yesterday, so please, today or another time, please feel free to come in and look at these lovely paintings you can see on the wall. Welcome to the first of our lunchtime lectures for this semester, and our speaker today is Dr. Ahmet Gürata, who is the chair of the Communication and Design Department here at Bilkent. However, he did begin life as an economist, I believe. He studied his bachelor's in economics in the university, Ankara University, in the 1980s and 90s, but then saw the light and moved in a more artistic direction and came to study graphic design at Bilkent for his MA, before moving to London for his doctoral research. And he did work on movie remakes and the reception of international films in Turkey. While in England, he taught at the University of Southampton, and then he returned to Turkey, and he was teaching at Sabancı and Gazi universities before coming to Bilkent in 2007. He has published a number of important works, and we have some of his work displayed upstairs. He works especially in the area of the history of Turkish cinema, cross-cultural reception, remakes, as we mentioned before, and documentaries. He's very active in the film area in Turkey in general, and is a member of the Turkish Association of Documentary Filmmakers and of the UNESCO Turkish National Commission's Communication Committee. That's a lot of words there. Okay, his subject today, the end of cinema, or how I learned to stop worrying and love new cinephilia. The main thesis, I think, is whether cinema as a medium for entertainment is actually disappearing or declining in the world, or whether it's perhaps just changing and adapting to new technologies that, of course, we face all the time. And in my experience, every time they open a new shopping mall in Ankara, there's always one of those very large cinema complexes there. So it seems to me that cinema, at least in Turkey, is thriving. But Ahmet obviously will enlighten us more on that as he goes into his speech. Just two little points before we start. Please, if possible, can you switch off your cell phones, okay, or switch them to silent mode so that we will not get disturbed during the talk. And we're hoping to have maybe 20 or 15 minutes at the end for discussion. So if you have any questions for Ahmet at the end, he'll be happy to answer those and lead the discussion. Okay, I'll leave the floor to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, David, and thank you for all of you for coming today. Today I'm not going to present any sort of new and original ideas about this discussion, but I'm just trying to summarize or overview discussions about the transformation of cinema within the past few decades. Actually, I would like to start with a short film. Maybe you would like, because it's part of the advantage of being a film scholar. You can always show some clips and talk less. Okay, maybe I should also remind you that the last Jew in the film was played by the director himself, David Cronenberg. Anyway, actually, let's sort of start with the title, End of Cinema. What does it mean? Actually, recently, perhaps I think 1995, the century of cinema was a kind of crucial time in this, event, and there were some sort of critics which are sort of claiming that the golden age of cinema was over. And Susan Sontag is one of them, and she was writing in 1996, said that the conflict between cinema as industry and cinema as an art form has been resulted with the victory of cinema as industry. And according to her, in the era of the hyper-industrial films, there is no role for cinephilia. Or the love of the films. And again, another quote, if cinephilia is dead, she suggests, then the movies are dead too, no matter how many movies, even very good ones, go on being made. So she's not alone in this sort of sentiment, I think. We can sort of cite various examples, quote various examples. One of them is, again, famous one is by director Peter Greenaway from 2003. He says cinema died on September 31st, 1983, when the zapper or remote control was introduced into the living room of the world. And if you sort of trace back this sort of feeling, you know, we can even go further back into 1890s, and even the inventor himself, Louis Lumière, said cinema was an invention without a feature. So this is something, you know, very recently, of course, I mean, say within 10, 20 years, people are claiming that we are witnessing a kind of end of an era, golden era. So let's have a look at if it's true. I mean, perhaps we can check the statistics. And one way of looking, I mean, instead of discussing whether the quality of the films are any good or not, let's have a look at the number of the admission screens and stuff like that. So if we look at the number of the viewers, spectators going to the cinema, the admissions, we can see in every country, almost in every country around the world, it depends in some time around after the Second World War or later, the number of the audiences are dropping drastically, you know. So here is a comparison between the UK and Turkey. In the UK it started in after the Second World War, maybe with the introduction of television, but also other sort of impacts. And in Turkey, it started mid-70s or early 70s, and it's been dropping. And you can also check other countries like Italy, Russia, or, you know, again, Turkey. Sometimes it's sort of more drastic and sometimes more recent, but it's sort of the similar, you know, drop in the number of the audiences we can observe. And together with that, of course, the number of the screens are dropping as well. But this is up until 1990s or 1995. And if you look at the last, say, again, 10, 15 years, we're sort of seeing a revival or, you know, a sort of a new emergence of cinema, but very slightly. So if we look at the figures of from 1995, for example, again, in all the countries in Europe, we can see that, like, you know, the total number of annual audiences are increased by 100 million or so over the years, but it's not sort of stable. Again, we see the same sort of figure in Turkey when we look at the, you know, from 1995. There's a steady increase once the admissions were like 9, 10 million, but last year it was 36 million in Turkey. So there is a kind of revival, but, you know, still, if you compare the era before, you can say that, you know, we are losing a large number of audiences. But what happened to these audiences? I mean, what are they watching right now? So another figure might be the comparison between TV, cinema, and DVD. So this is the number for the worldwide receipts for 6 major Hollywood studios. And if you can see, of course, we have to say that in the 1950s and 60s, almost 100% of the revenues were from theatrical releases. But in 1980s, it was almost half of the revenues of the studios, and 37% was television. And this has also changed recently, and the last sort of figure is from 2007. And here you can see that video and DVD is almost covering the 0.5% of this revenue. So we can say that more people are watching film on DVD or computer screen than you know, movie theaters. So there's a kind of, you know, important transformation, dramatic transformation with the new technologies. So movies, television, and computer screens are sort of converging in a way. I mean, in that sense, you know, we can watch cinema in various other sort of venues. And in that sense, these 3 screens are, you know, although being separate, sort of at the same time, we see images which are very similar in those screens. And here, digital, I think, is a kind of buzzword or an important, crucial word. And we can talk about a sort of a digital paranoia, maybe, in some sense. But we shouldn't forget that this doesn't mean, I mean, there's always a close relation between you know, television and DVD, as you can see from these figures. You know, it's a kind of what you might call a kind of repackaging or repurposing of the same product through different media. And in that sense, the film industry probably is stronger than ever. But of course, we shouldn't forget that it doesn't start only with the digital revolution or so-called digital revolution. Before that, we had the VCRs, video cassette recorders in 1960s and 70s, then the cable television, and also as Peter Grünewald mentions, the television remote control. All these were sort of seen as a threat to the movie industry. And like if you look at the archives, for example, in 1970s, the Hollywood companies were suing Sony because of the VCR, and they thought it was a violation of the copyrights, and it will end the movies at all. But in the end, it turned out to be a sort of very a sort of a good source of revenue for the industry. So we might say the film industry now or the cinema now has a kind of a split or schizophrenic identity where, you have different sort of exhibition contexts, whether it's movie theaters or the home. Recently it's the home. And you also have a sort of the material basis is shifting from analog to digital. And so if we look at again the sort of the shrinking of the film going around the world, can we say it's an end of a golden age or an end of cinephilia, like Susan Sontag suggests? So let's have a look at what's gone with these sort of new developments. I think perhaps we can say one thing for sure is we're having home viewing instead of movie going. I mean, personally, I also prefer, or I don't know, it's maybe more comfortable. And now I used to probably go maybe at least one movie a week, but nowadays I think it's once a month. Instead, I watch them at home. And the digital technologies of shooting, editing, projection, and distribution also is changing. And if you look at there's a kind of transformation, and it's expensive. For example, if you look at the digital projections, it's sort of now it's around the world 15% of the projections are digital, but they want to sort of increase that number, and there's a kind of transformation still going on. So what's gone with these developments? We don't have a sort of a dream palace or a single auditorium movie theater like we used to have. Instead, we have multiplexes within the shopping malls. And perhaps we're losing that kind of social interaction which we have when we go to the movie theater, going out, meeting people, and discussing film with other people. So that's kind of something which we can see changing. So can we again say that this is sort of the end of the love for movies, thus cinephilia, or is it sort of we're witnessing a sort of transformation? I think the easy answer, despite these developments, there is a kind of interest in cinema. I mean, as you see, there's an increase in the sales of DVDs, videos, and also there's lots of stuff available on the internet, whether legal or illegal. There's lots of stuff you can watch. So what we are witnessing maybe is people have much easier access to cinema culture than the past. For example, in the, say, 10, 15 years ago, a classical movie, let's say like The Hour of the Furnaces, which is a Chilean movie, which is 8 hours, you can only see it in a festival, and it's hard to get. And now you can easily download it on, through the internet and watch it at your home. So that sort of access is much easier now. And it's also, maybe we're kind of seeing an expansion of different media which we might call film or not. I don't know, we can discuss that. We see not just Hollywood or European stuff, we're seeing, films from other countries, many other countries, or films which are lost or, forgotten, long forgotten, or experimental films, all sorts of different films, short films, documentaries. So there is kind of, what we call film is sort of, maybe the definition is changing as well, which I'm going to discuss later. And also with that, we have sort of the viewer's control over the film is changing now. You can freeze, stop, or rewind a film and, do lots of things with film. And even cut and make your own clips with the films and then put it, on YouTube or other sort of medium. And also, if you compare with the sort of the old cinephilia, in the past, probably people were, of course they had discussions, they had their magazines, but probably they were sort of less, more conservative in the way that, the sheer experience of watching a film in a movie theater was unique and something, which you can't share with other people. But now, you can swap your movies, through the internet, or you can write your comments with blogs or other sort of stuff. So there's sort of a new cinephilic culture is perhaps emerging recently, and this is slightly different from the old cinephilia, but still I think it's a bit early to say that we're witnessing the end of cinephilia. So what we might conclude in a way that sort of cinephilia is dead or long live the new cinephilia. This is, I think, probably the summary of the new recent book by critic Jonathan Rosenbaum called Hello Cinephilia, Film Culture in Transition. And he says one could argue that with video distribution and the internet, cinephilia has become a more democratic pastime, no longer entrailed by the definitions of the good film promoted by the creators. The cinephile is free to collect and view multitudes of titles according to his or her own taste. So this is a kind of more optimistic sort of view after, let's say, 15 years of Susan Sontag's claim. But I think this doesn't answer many questions. I could end my talk here and we can discuss, the new cinephilia, and this would be a right point. But I think we're missing something when we say, cinephilia is still alive, very much alive, and that just the film culture has transformed. I think there are more problems, more questions to be asked. So the last part of my talk, I want to question the identity of. Still, I think we're having some sort of identity problem with cinema, and we need to discuss that sort of problem to decide whether it's an end of an era. So let's start with those questions, about the identity of the film. So if, for example, can film still be a film if it relies on a digital technology then, rather than analog technology? Or what are the elements that are defined film, throughout the, say, decades? And maybe another question, can we call everything a film? For example, a video which we can download from YouTube. Actually, this is, something I chose on purpose because this is a video by a sort of a great master, Chris Marker. And this is a sort of home video he shot and put on YouTube. So again, we can discuss, it could be any other sort of user, and still the question is valid whether this is a film. So in order to answer these questions, I think perhaps we need to ask the good old question which famous film critic André Bazin asked in the title of his book, what is cinema? So again, if you try to answer this question with comparison to digital and analog technologies, it's a kind of difficult question. It's since, say, 1920s, many film theorists, critics are trying to answer this question, and it's because it's something, you know, the film, the medium itself is not something very tangible, so it's, you know, it's not like any other art form, so it's very difficult to sort of pin down. But maybe can start with sort of ask what is the sort of the materiality of film, or, you know, what's sort of material the film belongs, with the basis of photography and cinema. Actually, one answer would be the film itself, the celluloid film, which is sort of with a mechanical recording process, captures images, registers images with this sort of with a photosensitive chemical surface. But perhaps this is not again a perfect answer, because we also have, you know, other sort of things which we relate with cinema, you know, the projection itself, the exhibition process, its industry, which is an economy, and also perhaps our, you know, discussions about cinema is also part of their domain. So I think it's, you know, maybe, I mean, not the right answer, but if we say, let's say, presume that if it was the celluloid film, the material basis of the cinema, but then with the digital technology, we are losing that sort of base. I mean, we don't have any sort of material object anymore with the digital technology. It's sort of recorded, sort of a numeric value recorded in our computer. So I think if we compare these two sort of technologies, analog and digital technologies, I think one sort of key notion is what the analog technology is kind of what we call indexical, meaning, you know, it has sort of its reference, you know, outside world, and it's sort of sculpted on the, you know, the material film itself. Whereas in the digital, it's the indexicality is just, you know, created with sort of some mathematical formulas or functions. Again, if you look at, you know, the image and whether it's analogous to the real life or whatever, it's filming, you know, in the analog technology, the analogy is coming from the substance and the indexicality of the film. Again, whereas in digital, it's sort of just a simulation, a computer simulation. So that's the kind of different, and I think that's one of the key issues many critics and theorists discuss. If you're losing if the film is not anymore indexical, then we can't call a film, we can call it an animation, for example. That's one of the arguments Lev Monovich brings. But again, I'll leave that to our question time discussion. And perhaps we can look at other sort of aspects of film to discuss, you know, what is specific to film, or what is the medium, is it medium specific, or how can we define it? So, as I said, the material specificity is very difficult to pin down, and because cinema is both a temporal and a spatial medium, and you know, it's a sort of a hybrid medium. It has images, sounds, music, speech, a lot of things. And if we ask the question of whether it's a sort of a unique art, like in the autographic art, the answer is probably no, because it's very difficult to again define the author of the film. I mean, we all, you know, say that it's the director who is the author or the author of the film, but again, there's a lot of people involved in the making process, so it's very difficult to identify who the real author is. Then that sort of again complicates the question of uniqueness, whereas in other arts it's sort of easily identifiable. And if you look at other art or compare, let's say this is in the case of literature or other arts, if you look at other kinds of art like music, we can say that there's some arts which are sort of two-stage, where you have a sort of a primary, you know, a sort of a stage of composition and then a performance stage. and the sort of the creative work is finished when the notation is complete. This film is kind of similar to that. I mean, it's similar to music in that sense. But again, if we ask if whether it has a aesthetic value, what's the performance then? What is the composition, and what's the difference between different performances? If you look at from that perspective, again you see that the old copies of the film are identical, and that sort of again brings the question of aesthetic value. So, having no unique author or signature and having a sort of a debatable aesthetic value, the image has a problem with, the cinematic image has a problem with uniqueness, or sort of say specificity, material specificity. So in order to answer that, I think again we can look at another theorist from this time from 1970s, Christian Metz, and his Language and Cinema. He says cinema is the sum of films themselves, or rather the sum of the traits which in the films themselves, and taken to be characteristic of what sense to be certain language. I think that's what's important here is the notion of language. So instead of looking at the specificity in uniqueness or aesthetic value, perhaps we should look at this language. What is specific about this language? So again, if we read through Metz's book Language and Cinema, he defines cinema as both the actual films, which are the aesthetic artifacts, which we define as cinema, plus the cinematic code, which is sort of constructed and does not exist prior to our analysis. So I think the key here again is, if you want to discuss about cinema and its specificity, the right place probably will to discuss about what's sort of the cinematic code or the language of cinema. Then perhaps we can also, this would give us a large number of sort of advantages to discuss a number of issues. So I think if we look at, under this sort of light, if we look at the argument back again, we can say that, yes, the film is substituted with the digital medium, but cinema, I think, persists as a narrative form and psychological experience, as we see from, and I think we can say that it's kind of expanding. It's not just the film screen and movie theater. I would argue that all those images, whether we watch on television or computer screen, are part of that experience and would count in cinema. And I think that's where the film theory, gets in. And if we define the sort of specificity of cinema as the cinematic code or understanding cinematic code, then this, gives us a sort of a tool, interesting tool, which we can discuss a lot of media. The images we see in YouTube or all sort of other images. I would say again, of course this will be a cliche, but then if you return back to the question at the beginning, we can say that cinema or the film has not died yet, but it's kind of remediated with these developments. Perhaps I should end here because we have some, 15, 20 minutes, so I think we can have, rather than me talking, we can have a discussion. I'm sure you all have sort of ideas about this topic.
Well, let's first thank Before we throw the floor open, I just wanted to paraphrase Mark Twain, saying obviously rumours of the death of the cinema have been greatly exaggerated, something like that. I think that seems to be the main message. But thank you very much, Ahmet, for that very interesting talk. So please, I think I saw one hand going up. Okay, it's Kate here. Questions?
If I watch Avatar on my iPod, do I become a new author?
The author, you mean?
A new author.
A new author. I would say yes, because you're kind of, because you're transforming the film, whether by stopping or, or maybe, rewinding or, whatever. I think Yeah, in each case, the experience of, we have a different experience in each case, you know, and I think in each of these events, the viewer becomes an author, him or herself. I would agree. I don't know, what do you...
It's said due to authenticity. Certainly it isn't, Cameron's vision. Because it's on my iPod, it's not 3D. It's not in the cinema experience, so it really starts with film.
Yeah, that's another issue. I mean, yeah, difference between the 3D version and the 2D version. Yeah, I mean, I think the filmmakers now probably would be aware of these sort of different conditions of viewing, you know, and in the near future probably we'll see more people watching these on much smaller screens, and so probably, you know, I don't know whether, I mean, some films are adapting themselves to this condition, but like in the case of Avatar was kind of doing the opposite, and it was sort of trying to bring people into the movie theater, and so that was the idea with Avatar, and it was a kind of successful in a way. I mean, you know, it has huge number of admissions, and it also helped the movie theaters turn into digital projection. Many theaters bought digital projections, so it served its purpose. But I don't know whether it's, you know, in the future will be successful or not, because still it's kind of difficult to invite people to movie theater. Okay, which way, David, shall we?
Okay, we'll take the first. Sorry,
It seems to me that the authors who consider cinema they don't distinguish between the movie theater and the film itself. Because it seems to me from your lecture that it's actually expanding. You know, you can find films in more I don't know how to express it. You can find them in more outlets, more ways now. Why do you think the authors consider cinema dead? Because it's out of movie theaters now. Is the cinema the theater?
I think I forgot to mention there are some negative aspects to this. One thing, we can say that there's too much. I mean, it's overwhelming now. You have too many films, and sometimes what we do is, I mean, personally, I do that, store on my laptop, and I don't have time to watch them. So it's like, you know, maybe some might argue that, yes, we're, you know, having access to lots of films, but are we really watching them? You know, that might be one question, negative aspect. And the second sort of negative aspect would be the ideal sort of viewing position, you know, because ideally you have to get immersed into that film and have a sort of a better relationship with the film. You have a sort of need a probably limit the outside conditions, be in a dark auditorium. Instead, what we're doing is, while we're watching in a small screen, we're doing other things and stuff like that. So I think that's also part of the discussion, and many commentators believe that there are, you know, sort of, you know, it's sort of transforming our viewing experience in a sort of a negative sense. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't see anything, you know, or, you know, it's something which is happening right now. So, and, but I think I can understand their point in a way, what they criticize.
Jayla had a question.
One of the reasons why I don't go to the cinema so often as I used to anymore is I don't like the standard uniform look of the cinema. So I was going to ask your personal opinion about the monopoly we experience these days of companies taking over, for example, most of Ankara now. And you see the same company opening branches in different places. And I'm a person that's actually liked the movie theater
variety, or
for example, remember, or even Tepe Max felt different because it had bigger seats and nice, you know, cushioned chairs. The whole experience was different. So I don't like being there because it doesn't feel nice anymore. Do you sense a similar
yes.
with other people?
Yeah, I think, and they're doing it sort of consciously, the whole new architecture of cinema theater is changing. In the past, like with these, movie theaters like Akün, you have these big screens and sort of spectacular ornaments and decorations. It's kind of a, going to a spectacle in a way. And whereas in these multiplexes in the shopping malls, it's becoming a part of the sort of the shopping mall ground, and it's sort of opening to the halls of the shopping mall instead of, sort of secluding itself from the outside environment in that sense. So it's, yeah, the environment is serving to that purpose, and of course I'm not happy with that, I would say, personally. Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, that used to be a part of the entire environment, as the gentleman was saying. I grew up in New York and in the New York area, and I remember when a big Hollywood movie used to come out, that you used to have to buy tickets in advance to go to the theater. Yeah. And it was the whole experience of being there with the big screen. And the only big screen I know now is in Istanbul, the Emek. And I would rather go see a lousy movie.
And they're closing down, yeah.
That's gone, and that kind of romantic feeling of the texture of what the film is, you just can't find it anymore. But again, as my friend here was saying, historically, as soon as we have a new technology, everything changes to adapt to the technology. So just the idea that you could watch Avatar on this little thing is just kind of amazing. But we've seen this before in the media where we adapt ourselves. Oh, now I have a microphone, so now I don't need to be able to speak loudly and project to the last row because I have the microphone to do that job for me. And there's still great movies. There's still great movies out there, but I'm afraid that part of the experience is gone because the environment's not there. And like you said, that's part. When I think of the movies, I think of that place with the stars on the ceiling.
Well, my mother still calls them the talkies.
Yeah.
I mean, this entire discourse was reproduced about 100 years ago. When film stars became overnight obsolete because they had squeaky voices. So every
singing in the rain.
Yeah, every time there is a new technology, we have to adapt to it or not. And the reason I picked Avatar was because it was meant to bring people back into the cinema to see it, because it's nearly impossible to see it. Maybe people are moving into it. I downloaded Third Man the other night on iMac. It was awful. It was thin. It was flimsy. It just when the light comes on the face, it doesn't work anymore because it doesn't have the texture the actual film did. So we have to make new things and add new tricks to make cinema relevant.
Okay, I saw that hand first.
I just want to point out that this is happening across media technology as well. We're talking about the death of the book without the death of those mediums.
Yeah.
People talked about the death of recorded music when the CD came out. And there was this sort of moment of backlash where a lot of bands who weren't necessarily very popular but very attuned to this ideal listening experience, we're talking about the ideal viewing experience, in order to recreate what they felt was the ideal listening experience, they only released an album on vinyl for a certain number of weeks, perhaps before the rest of the release proceeded. And I'm wondering if that would even be possible in cinema. I think Avatar is kind of a step in that direction. You have to see it the way the director intended if you're going to claim the experience that the director intended. Would it be possible to sort of challenge the industry in that way? Say, I'm only putting my film out on film in theaters. Forget about DVDs, forget about internet release, forget about everything else. How would people react? Because that is a good question.
I think our sort of the idea of leisure has changed, and so probably again going out for any kind of spectacle, whether it's a movie or anything, it's only if it's only part of the shopping then we would go. Maybe I don't know. It's probably like going to a concert or a conference. It's something we change. I think we should accept that.
Yeah, we have time for a couple more questions. There were some hands. Okay.
I think it's important to know, to ask what's the difference what's the impression in our minds? It's a psychological experience, you say. So, is it the same experience when we watch it from a big screen or a small screen? What's happening in our minds? Is it the same impression?
The first answer I would say, it sort of depends. I mean, it's like, sometimes, one sort of maybe concept will be whether we'll be immersed into the film and see. And I think it's, in that sense, sometimes it doesn't make much difference whether you watch it on small screen or big screen. But obviously, yeah, there will be differences. And I think there are some works on that. I'm not familiar with it, but psychologists done some work on it. But I wouldn't say it's sort of, you can create an environment in your home which is sort of very similar to the movie theater experience, I believe. But it again depends. I don't know if...
Young gentleman there, and then we can get Don's questions. First, this chap here.
I have two questions, possible. Firstly, personally, 3D, for me 3D is the end of cinema. Because the purpose is different. This is about money. And Titanic will be remade in 3D. Pirates of the Caribbean 4 will be in 3D. And Christopher Nolan said, I thought Warner Bros. Told me to make Inception in 3D. So it's continuous. And what's your opinion about 3D? And for me, as said before, it is the end of cinema. And my second question is, some people categorize movies as independent movie against blockbuster, art house movie against films, or there's some kind of discriminations. And my question is, again, what's your opinion about it? For me, is this wrong? Should we see cinema as a whole, or kind of categorizing discrimination is right?
I got 1 minute for each question.
Okay, first question, 3D. I have my doubts about the 3D, and because okay, Avatar was successful, but I don't think any other 3D movie will sort of surprise the viewer audience, and then because it's a nice spectacle, but once we experience it, the other experiences will be sort of similar. That's what I feel. And I think most viewers would feel the same way. For the different sort of types of classifications of film, yes, there's a sort of rationale behind, but I think it's becoming more and more problematic. And for example, in the case of independent and mainstream movies, now most independent films are sponsored by big companies, or again the division between art house and mainstream. That's all becoming more problematic these days. So yeah. Can we have one more question?
Let's have one last question.
Ron?
I did say Don before, didn't I? Yes. Okay, Don, we're
the question of cinema's social and political importance, like a sort of important setting for social and cultural negotiation, I think is maybe central to this issue, because in the old days when you went into a cinema, you sit in a darkened space in this kind of mob of other people, and your agency and will is temporarily suspended. You submit basically to this assault of visual and auditory propositions until the director decides it's over. And your only willful option is to sort of say, this is disgusting, get up and leave. So the Greenaway comment about the remote control, I think, is very much alluding to that particular problem. As soon as I have my remote control, it's like, you know, I think I want another beer now. So I can just sort of suspend the experience, get comfortable again, and then get back into it. Whereas before, the old cinema, and that's maybe the cinema that might be dead, you know, there was a sort of socially created suspension of my will as a spectator, suspension of my agency as a spectator, suspending me in a kind of a critical engagement, and then I, you know, re-emerge as a social actor after that, and that was the social agency of the cinema, which has probably been lost by all this augmentation of the agency of the spectator.
I think you're right, and this also, I think, brings us back to the issue of the author again. I mean, I think Greenaway is also mentioning that in each case, when with the remote control, you're also becoming the author of the film in a way, and so I think those are kind of related. Yeah, I think perhaps we have to look at all these issues, and Greenaway's answer would be is if it's the case, then we have to encourage people to interact with the films more. So yeah, that's one option, and I think the other option is probably is get them more sort of immersed in that experience.
Well, it's obviously a testament to the interest of this talk that we could probably carry on quite a long time discussing these things, but time is up, and I know some people have classes to get to in the next 10 minutes, so I'd like to thank Dr. Gürata again. I'd like to point out that in a few weeks' time, this time on Wednesday the 10th of November, Professor Subide Togan from the Economics Department will be talking about the issue of Turkish membership of the EU here, and you'll receive notification about that near the time. Okay, please let's thank Dr. Gürata once again.